In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the alternator on this Ford F-150. We're working with the 5.4 liter V8, so let's get started. Let's start by disconnecting the negative battery terminal so we can completely disconnect the circuit between the alternator and everything else. We don't want to short anything out. There we go. Pull it off and set it aside. Now we can safely work on the alternator. Then we have to disconnect the entire intake tube from the engine. So loosen up the 8mm clamp on the air filter housing. And then on the intake side, where the throttle body is, there's another clamp. At this point you can pull this whole intake assembly, or snorkel, whatever you want to call it, back and up and out. Now in order to remove the belt off of the alternator, I need to get my 1/2-inch ratchet or breaker bar or belt tensioner tool, whatever you have, all the way down here where I can slide it on and put pressure towards the driver's side. So if I push this towards the driver's side, it'll actually release tension off of the belt. Now you want to be careful of all of your wires that are in the way. Don't want to damage anything. And I'm just going to take the belt out from underneath this flat pulley. I'm going to leave my tool in here. There we go. This should give me just enough slack to pull it off of here. And now we can take the alternator out. At the top, let's unplug the 2 wires that are connected to the alternator. This one has a little locking tab on the back side right here that you can push and remove. And now this cap needs to be pulled off so that you can expose the 13mm nut that's holding on the main power wire. Remove this, be gentle, you don't want to snap that stud. There we go. Once you break it free, it should come off fairly easily by hand. Take this off, set this aside, and this is why it was important for us to disconnect the battery, because this is always connected to the battery, has live power, so if the circuit is complete between the positive and negative, this can ground out on anything that is touching, because everything's grounded on an engine, so it can destroy some things. You don't want to do that. Let's avoid that. Let's pop this retainer off of this bracket. Use a trim tool, pry bar, screwdriver, whatever you have really. Push this aside. This is actually a stud with a 10mm cutout and then another 10mm bolt here. There are also 2 more bolts down here, both 10mm, so I'm going to break these free first, and I'll just put my air ratchet on it to make things a little faster. Okay, these 2 are the same, so no need to worry about mixing them up. At the top here, we just have to remove these 2 bolts. Well, this is a stud, that's a bolt. Gonna leave this one partially in. These are also 10mm in size, by the way. Okay, once you take these out, and once you do that, you should be able to take your alternator, slide it forward, and straight up and out. Now take your alternator, if you had a new one, drop it right back down into its location. And I'm going to put the top mounting bolts back in first to kind of situate it, make sure it's pressed up against the block where it needs to be and pulled all the way up. It's more important than locating it at the bottom first. The bottom has an adjustment for height, whereas these don't have any adjustment at all. So I'm going to start this bolt in. That one started. I can lift up this side, start the stud in. This one's bottomed out, but I'm going to still snug it a little bit. This one is not bottomed out yet. Okay, just make sure they're nice and snug here. And now we can put in the 2 lower bolts, which should line up perfectly at this point. All right, snug these up. You don't have to hold it at this point because these are holding the entire alternator on. I will check all these by hand, and snug. Perfect. So now let's reconnect the wires at the top. When it comes time to reconnecting these, check them for corrosion. This one's good. I'm going to click that down into place. This one, you really have to inspect to make sure it's clean so it can make a good connection. Now, I'm obviously reusing my old alternator just for video purposes, but if you had a new one, you wouldn't have to worry about corrosion here. so much as you would right here. The wire needs to be clean. If it isn't, use a wire brush or sandpaper, sand it down, secure this, put the little eyelet back down on the stud, and let's grab the mounting nut. Your new alternator should come with a new mounting nut. Use that, thread this down all the way, and then this is a very delicate stud. It's brass, so all I'm gonna go is 1/8 of a turn after it's bottomed out. All you need to do is literally just snug this down here so I can make a good connection. That's it. You will break the stud internally if you crank on it really hard. Put this cap back on. It's important that it seals up from moisture. Actually, a little tip, if you wanted to, you could put silicone paste on the top of it. Considering that this had no corrosion at all, I'm going to assume that this cap is plenty of a seal to protect it from debris and water, so I'm gonna leave it as is. And now we have to put the belt back on. So I'm gonna pull on the tensioner here, release tension. I have to grab this belt. I'm actually going to put it over the alternator first, just like that. Make sure it's situated down here and here. Check all the pulleys, make sure it didn't fall off of any of them. And now it'll be the easiest if you leave this for last, because you can just do this and just slip it right down and under. Make sure it is perfectly situated on all the other pulleys. As you can see, I provided a diagram on the screen so you can double check it. Everything looks fine for me, so I'm going to remove my 1/2-inch ratchet from here. There we go. Now let's put the intake tube back on. Take this, slide it over on the throttle body first, and then on the air filter side. Oops, make sure it doesn't slide off in the process. You want to make sure it's seated on both so it can seal up. You don't want any air leaks past the mass airflow sensor. It would make it run poorly. So now let's snug up the two clamps. Press this one tight up against the air filter housing. As you can see, it has the two arrows that have to line up. Just make it snug and do the same over here. Doesn't move, so that's perfect. Put this on. It might make a couple sparks. That's okay. It's normal. You don't want to make this extremely tight. Once it's snug, try to spin it. If it doesn't spin, it's tight enough. It's perfect. If you tighten it any more, it'll actually crush the terminal here, the two ends, and it could over time expand it. It'll stretch, and then it won't hold on future batteries. The more you tighten it, the more you over tighten it, the more it'll stretch. So that's good to go. Let's turn the engine on.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.